Everyone, welcome again to one of CavanKerry Press's readings. This is reading number 4, and we have Robin Silbergleid with us today and Judith Sornberger. They're both going to be reading from their older CavanKerry Press collections, as well as some of their new work, because as you may know, artists and writers especially are always creating, they're always producing. So since they've published with us, they've been creating new work, and we wanted to showcase some of that new work as well. What's really great about these readings is that there's going to be 2 Q&A sessions. So Robin and Judith are both going to respectively read from their old CavanKerry Press work for about 10 minutes and talk a bit about that. Afterwards, we'll have a brief 15-minute Q&A break where we'll take questions from the audience. Afterwards, we'll cut that short. We'll start the cycle again where they'll be reading from new material for about 7 minutes. Afterwards, we will finish out the hour with more Q&A. If Judith and Robin are up to it, we can even extend it a bit past 8 o'clock if it's not past our bedtimes yet. Cool, okay, so without further ado, the order is going to start with Robin Silberglide first. So let me read her bio. Robin Silberglide is the author of The Baby Book, The Memoir Texas Girl, and several chapbooks. Most recently in the Cubiculum Nocturnum, Dancing Girl Press. She is also co-editor with Christina Quinn of Reading and Writing Experimental Texts, Critical Innovations. She teaches at Michigan State University, where she directs the creative writing program. She also collaborates with the Infertility Education, Oral History, and Portraiture Project, and traveling art exhibition, The Art of Infertility. So without further ado, Robin Silberglide, and you may now take yourself off mute.
Thanks, Dimitri, for that introduction and for hosting this evening. I have to say it's really strange reading work from my kitchen, and I apologize if kids are coming and going. They've been sent away, but this is life with quarantine right now. So I'm going to read, as Dimitri said, for a little bit from my book, The Baby Book, that came out with CavanKerry in 2015. And it's really strange and sort of wonderful to go back to that book. I haven't thought about it in a while, actually. But just given how intimate the book is, it details a kind of long struggle with infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. So given how intimate that is and the kind of larger historical moment that we're living in, I wanted to read some of the poems that are lighter in the book. So mostly I'll be reading from the first half where the narrative is a bit more optimistic. So I will give this a go. This first poem, and I should say also, I'm not going to talk a lot between the poems, but the whole project really makes use of a number of different forms to get at the same subject matter. So it kind of deals obsessively with both form and content. So it starts with a sestina. Infertility sestina. This is how it goes. Say you want a baby. Say you are 27 and alone, as in uncoupled. There is no father in this equation. You read taking charge of your fertility, keep charts and graphs, cycle days and symptoms, months, tracking cervical fluid, basal body temperature. Patient, you wait, you bleed, you write. You are more patient than you thought possible. Everyone is having babies but you. You read messages online. Every month, someone else gets pregnant. You feel alone, certain of the diagnosis, 628.9 infertility, female, unknown, although you are only lacking a father's DNA. Your child will have a donor, not a father. The sample shipped on dry ice to the clinic. Patience, your doctor says, you could be fertile myrtle. After the procedure, you go to the Baby Gap, buy teeny white socks and onesies, a lone purple cap. You imagine dressing your newborn months from now. Cycles tick by in prenatals and pills, 6 months of progesterone supplements, and finally, positive. I'm a father, the nurse jokes when she draws your blood. She left you alone with your legs in the air 2 weeks ago, your patient checkout form on the counter, and in those quiet moments, a baby started to take shape. Simple kiss of egg and sperm, and bam. In the fertility clinic waiting room, you skim pamphlets on male factor infertility and the magazines that have sat there for months mocking you. Working mother, American baby, fit pregnancy. It is your nurse, not some father-to-be, who sits with you for the sonogram, patiently searching for the embryo, the heartbeat, and then she leaves you alone to put on your clothes, to drive home, more lonely than you have ever been. Not pregnant, your chart says, infertile, blighted ovum, missed miscarriage, D&C at 11 weeks, 4 days. Patient will call to schedule follow-up appointment in a month. This is how it goes. You wanted to be a single mother, but there is a black hole in your uterus, not a baby. Postcards from the clinic, too. My doctor comes out and kisses her son while I wait to miscarry. Hannah. Praise God, the midwife says. The catheter slides like thread through the cervix. Praise God. 2 syllables of thanks or a command. This morning, 2 blue lines on the test strip. She raises the table and I am carried, my body a Torah, my feet the handles, turning, turning. Have you prayed for a child? No prayer in the Siddur on my shelf, straight and blue as a positive result. Blessing on the occasion of insemination, blessing for a child born to one. I praise Sarah, mother of infertility. I praise Rivka and Rachel and Leah. Yes, I have prayed. I pray for all things new, these million sperms swimming, this egg and ephemeral shore. In 9 months, I will name my daughter Hannah, child only of prayer. So I have to say, I see some faces popping up at the top of my screen, and it's really lovely and delightful. So there's some people I don't know, and some people I know from many parts of my life. And this is probably the best thing that's happened during this quarantine time, is this coming together. So I really appreciate all of you being here to share this with me. I'm going to read just 2 more poems from this collection, and then I think we'll turn things over to Judith and have some conversation. An open letter to our sperm donor. Our daughter looks like me, people say, the architecture of her eyebrows and pointed stare. But in the photograph of you at 13 months, our baby's toothless grin after she's grabbed the cat by the tail. Every child, you said, needs a mother who reads, and each night I let her suck thick cardboard illustrations. Big red barn, goodnight moon, while I balance her on my lap. If you lived with us, you would know this. Perhaps you would bring me a cup of tea while I nurse her on the couch, a book of poems open nearby. Sometimes I wonder if you wonder about us when you're at work in the laboratory or when you're feeding your new son a bottle. The stories of our children are woven together. The tapestry couldn't be more beautiful, filled with these widening holes. So this last poem is actually one of my favorites in the collection, and it's one of the longest. It's an Ars Poetica. As I found myself trying to get pregnant and trying to write a book and get tenure and all that stuff at the same time, which is I don't want to re-experience that. But this poem is also a double abecedarian, so it moves toward and away from the letter Z. And I don't know if that's apparent just from reading it out loud, but it would be certainly on the page. Ars Poetica. As the world awakens, you sit straight-backed at your desk. Coffee brews, breakfast. The smell wafts up the stairs. Coffee, the computer, maybe a pen. If you were Billy Collins, details like these would unfurl into something magical. Each blue Bic pen entering the realm of the symbolic. Fresh croissants and the curve of the moon. For now, greatness is as far off as the moon in the sky. The question, how to write a poem. Consult Donald Hall, Mary Oliver, interrogate all the authorities, and still, here you are, just a young poet struggling, a handful of syllables. K sticks in your throat, kestrel, kingfisher, line by pathetic line, the poem limps along a hard labor. This metaphor comes from the only place that matters, the baby nestled in its mother's pelvis, the midwife urging the body to open. You can hear her moaning, perineum stretching, the push splitting her in two. No quest here, no cantos, no Patterson, not even a prelude or Richard Hugo's Triggering Town. It's reproduction, not sex or romance. It's embryos in petri dishes, trigger shots of gonadotropin, test after test after test. Ultimately, maybe that's all we can ever ask for. Vials of blood, dark tubes rolled in the nurse's hands. When you're stuck, like now, you go back to conception, X meets X, and 9 months later, a girl is born. Your hands are greedy, you want to hold her. The camera zooms in on the young mother's face and stops, zooms out to the hospital room, the snow on the windows, yellow balloons, vases flush with daffodils. You haven't had sex in so long, you've forgotten how the body moves, the creamy white of your skin against your lover's. Wordsworth writes of the vale, the river, the mountain, nature as the source of the sublime. Under the poet's spell, the world becomes metaphor, tenor humming against vehicle like a bird ready to take flight. Still, you sit here, pecking out words, letting the syllables roll in your mouth like stones. It's that flat gray of winter, quiet when nothing ever happens, when you wait patiently for a delivery truck, for the stick to turn blue, ping of ovulation when anything is possible, a spark in the ovary, nestling embryo, nights when you dream of possibility, menses marked on the calendar in pink, your wait longer than you ever dreamed. You fiddle, try your hand at Kyrielle, Villanelle, Sonnet, Sistina, you'll try anything. Just start. Jump right in. Don't think too hard. Infertility begets infertility. Remember this in the harmony room, where the doctor guides your legs into the stirrup, says, "You'll feel my touch." And she is so tender, every nerve in your body begins to hum. And despite everything, despite months of failure and rejection, this could work. In 2 weeks, the stick could turn blue. In 9 months, a baby, a book, a single-celled wish. Amen. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much. I see so many claps happening throughout this feed. Robin, I love me a good Ars Poetica, especially something like this. You ever have a beginner student, they need to read this Ars Poetica. It basically tells them a bunch of different ways to write a poem. Wow. the canon and then plus the work. So many other people are coming in. Thank you so much for coming. That was Robin Silberglide. Before we move on to Judith Sornberger, I do want to mention the chat box. Put all your questions in the chat box. We are going to have a Q&A right after Judith is over. And at the beginning of that group chat, there is a chance to save 25% per book with the coupon code WORLDBOOK. That's the coupon code WORLDBOOK from our website. And without further ado, I will unpin myself and welcome Judith Sornberger. Sornberger, sorry.
It's okay, either way.
I knew it happened once. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
When it gets yellow around there.
Am I supposed to start? No.
Yes, yeah, it's your turn.
Oh, I thought you were going to introduce me.
Oh, yeah, I do need to introduce you. I apologize. Sorry. Thank goodness I could cut that stuff out of a recording, right? Okay, great. So Judith Sornberger is the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, I Call to You from Time, Practicing the World, and Open Heart. Her prose memoir, The Accidental Pilgrim, Finding God and His Mother in Tuscany, is from Shanty Arts. She is a professor emerita of Mansfield University of PA, where she taught English and created the Women's Studies program. Without further ado, for real this time, Judith Sornberger.
Thank you so much, Dimitri,
You're welcome.
for setting this up, for the introduction. And Gabriel, thank you so much too. And Jonathan, good to see you. Good to see everyone. And I especially want to thank my friends who showed up to support me tonight. I'm going to start with a poem. Practicing the World is a book about a 30-year marriage that ends when my husband, who is only 59 at the time, is diagnosed with bladder cancer and dies within 6 months. And so a lot of the poems happened before that. Some of them happened during that period, and some of them in the first year of my widowhood. But it's really a book about love. So a couple weeks ago, I broke my shoulder for the 3rd time. 3 shoulders, right? And so this is a poem about the first time I broke a shoulder when Bruce was still alive, a sonnet. Slow dance with broken shoulder. Cast and all, we dance our kitchen floor, though my broken wing holds us apart like some olden time bundling board, folded as it is over my heart. This spring, our woods turn young as we turn old, though new birdsong still catches us off guard, as much as when feet lose their earthly hold. Still, who'd believe I'd take a fall so hard? But love, let's be voracious as the creatures, after dozing away winter in their lairs, who guzzle all the good from our bird feeders, those pesky chipmunks, squirrels, and black bears. Let's dance with every hungry foe age sends us, until one finally dips us, drops us, ends us. Bruce was also a type 1 diabetic, which of course further complicated his diagnosis and his prognosis. So this is watching you test your blood sugar. Some evenings I practice the world without you. I don't want to, but the sky has ways of insisting as it takes on the sly intelligence of twilight. I make myself imagine blue without you. Just one color, just one hue, the deep lapis of Mary's glass robe at Chartres, that virgin blue so dazzling, I gasped at each turn on the labyrinth. I know I'll never make it back to an unworried blue. Even morning's cotton candy horizon is now the sweetness in the blood that warns you'll go before I do. Go first, like a kid off a ledge, daring the dark water's treacherous gleam. I keep diving for the blue, deeper than morning glories you planted for your grandfather, deeper than the eyes of the child you'll never father, deeper than the rivers of blood beneath our skin, as though I might arrive at the confluence where we two cannot be divided. The next one is called Happy Hour. Ever since the first night following your death, deer have been appearing in our yard around the time we'd return to the fire to drink martinis. When the first pair emerged in their dusky coats, one gazed so long into my eyes, I almost believed I'd entered the dream I've been craving, the one where you return in a disguise I see right through. In our early days, I said you seemed deer-like, with your fond dark eyes, delicate wrists. What about my studly biceps? You asked, flexing. Each night I enter sleep, ears perked for your laughter, or for the soft crush of hooves on snow. I drift back to the earliest days of deer and human, through hunger and wonder, to the magic of sudden apparition under the opal moon's hypnosis. Back to the ancient belief that a deer's luminous leap could leave this world and land in the next. This afternoon, when I found an antler in the snow-dazed garden, I didn't recognize it. Rib length, it was pronged, the way I pictured your bones when pain pierced you from within. But as my fingers closed over its cool curve, all the heat of the buck stung my eyes. His loss is temporary. His new antlers will bud in time for mating season, and I will be watching. Silent Night. Every carol this December sings your silence. I drive the icy roads we used to sing on to distract ourselves from danger, taking turns choosing the tunes till we ran out of verses, or until your reedy voice cracked on a high note or emotion, and embarrassed, you'd start replacing sacred words with naughty ones. It came upon a midnight clear, I'd begin, and you'd follow. That glorious dawn of old. Or you'd start, angels we have heard when high. And I'd refuse to go on till you promised to sing straight. But during the first Noel, you'd wander off again, a wayward lamb, to certain poor shepherds who lay humping their sheep. You are going straight to hell, I'd giggle. You never stopped, even when our headlights illuminated storms of swirling stars, and I begged you to pull over. Maybe you knew you wouldn't die that way. Alone on a cold winter's night, swaddled in the whispering heat of our all-wheel drive, I'm no longer terrified of icy roads. In fact, I'm almost hoping that one of these nights I'll spin off in your direction, singing, sleep in heavenly peace. One more from this collection, Flirting with Dogs. When you're a widow, you get your kicks where you can. Hey, cutie, you call to the blonde cocker spaniel hanging out the window in the car beside you. Male or female, who cares? Your husband used to cringe when you'd bend down to kiss a strange mutt on the snout. Good way to get your face torn off, he'd warn. But now you smooch whatever pooch you please. The eager Shih Tzu, the shy greyhound, the bad boy boxer who slipped his collar and went AWOL. All races, all creeds, even dogs with no breeding whatever. You don't vow to love them forever, believe you can keep them from harm. You don't worry whether one strays, is tough to train, leaves a coat of hair on the sofa, or slobbers when excited. All you want is a chance to kneel in the grass and look into their eyes for one moment, to connect to one another. You know, that's all you can ask for. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Judith. Hold on. What I have to do, I have to change it, but I was opening a jar for my fiance. Let me pin myself. Hi. Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you, Robin. I want to turn to the group chat because I am already getting some questions. For those of you joining us late, if you were waiting for Robin, that is totally fine. Robin will be back reading some poems in a few minutes. Now we'll take maybe about 15 minutes of Q&A. And the first question was originally for Robin, but I feel like both of you have something to attribute to this for an answer. So did you find yourself drafting these powerful poems around the same time this was happening, or did you find the need to write with some distance in between? Robin, we'll start with you.
Okay. Both, I guess both would be the one word short answer. That question. So some of the earliest poem in this book is now about 20 years old, which is much older than the collection itself. So I started drafting really early and then put things away for a while. The later sections of the book were definitely done from kind of temporal and emotional distance. So it feels like a moving target. And at this point, I mean, the material feels, I guess, emotionally still new, but the experiences itself are pretty far removed from my daily life. So the child, Hannah, who doesn't go by the name Hannah anymore, is now 16, not a baby. So it's quite a journey. That's my answer.
I would say that many of these poems, especially the ones that were written before Bruce's diagnosis, like the first I read about the dancing with the broken arm, broken shoulder, those and the ones written during his diagnosis were mostly written right, during the time that they happened. I would say that also the majority of the poems after he died were written not long after that, because that's how I survived that year, by writing poems. I'm not saying that it was therapy. I'm just saying that writing those poems gave me a place to put my feelings about what was going on, and a space for Bruce to still exist.
Right. Thank you. And an extension to that, I had a question about this myself because now at this point, this work has taken some time. Like Robin, you said that Hannah is now 16, and Judith, you've also had distance since this has happened. So how does it feel like to return to that work when it's kind of capitulated in a sort of time capsule where you're stuck in that place? So what is it like every time you pick it up again to read a story that was so capsulized by just this one point in your life?
Do you want to go first?
I'll let you go first this time.
Oh, thank you. Well, Bruce did die nearly 8 years ago, and so it's been a long time. And in some ways, it's that old thing about, in some ways it feels like it was just yesterday, and in some ways it feels like it was ages ago. I guess I find it really wonderful to read those poems because, it's a way of being in touch with him and in touch with those ways we were so close.
Great, excellent. And almost metaphysically, it's kind of like that thread that still exists, right?
Yes.
It kind of keeps you in that conversation. Excellent.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Robin?
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, it's there's a kind of delight and pleasure, oddly, going back to kind of witness these earlier experiences and earlier iterations of self. More so now than like when this book came out in 2015, and I was reading a lot from it. It was exhausting, honestly, emotionally, to kind of relive the experience. Generally, I think I'm pretty good about separating out like when I am writing in autobiographical modes, the self who experienced from the self who wrote to the self who is the kind of performer reading it. But there are these moments of kind of slippage and collapse that can get kind of tricky. I guess I'll leave it there for now.
So a follow-up question to that, and this one's coming from Christina. Can you speak to how that role then plays in writing when you are either trying to connect to a person that doesn't exist yet or like no longer exists? So how do you use those energies appropriately to come to that work and actually complete a piece? And if I can't even link it to another question, how are you negotiating truth versus narrative for the sake of the poem and the piece as well? Who's going first?
Do you want to go? Or
I think Robin, you can go first since
okay, I can go first.
already
Okay,
talking.
Yeah, I guess so. One of the things I tell my students is what I took as the best lesson about learning poetry from my own undergraduate education, which is poetry is fiction. And so even when I'm working with factual material, right? I mean, like this book has, bits of my medical records in it. It's very much real. It's also an imaginative landscape in some ways, or I like the quote from Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried, about, sometimes story truth is truer sometimes than happening truth, like that you can get narratively invested in something in a way that fact at some moments is inadequate or less than adequate. I feel like I'm wandering away from the question in some ways, but I do think I don't know, that's something that I work really hard toward, is kind of maintaining honesty, right? Without necessarily getting limited by factual material. And I think that'll be more true with the last poem I read tonight. And maybe we could talk more about it then.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll pick up on that. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Judith?
So Jonathan just posted something that Robert Cording has said about, he lies to tell a larger truth. And I think that's something that we poets do. We certainly, and I agree with Rochelle, who said that poetry is fiction. When I was first writing seriously in my late 20s, I would show my poems to my mother, and I would be writing about my own life, and I would be writing about our family, and she would notice some glitch in her idea of reality, and she said, okay, and I would tell her, well, most of this is like fact, but I changed some of the details to make it feel more like I wanted to feel.
Mhm.
And so every time I'd show her a poem, she'd say, now, this isn't like 100% real, right? Yeah, you're right. That's right, Mom. So I guess that's what I would say. And, basically agreeing with Robin on that.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, and it's interesting because we actually allow ourselves to rewrite those histories and rewrite those stories and rewrite those situations. And I think that's what makes people even turn to creative writing in general, right? That we could restructure our own history, or we could write it in the light that we would like. There's a couple more questions, but I want to hear some more poems. So, and I'm excited to see, Robin, what your extension is on the baby book. So if you can start, I'll give you your time. And then instead of doing the bio again, after you, we'll go right into Judith, then we'll take more questions. All right, keep the questions coming, everyone.
Okay, so I'm gonna read a little bit from this newish chapbook I have called In the Cubiculum Nocturnum, and I'm gonna hold it up because I think the cover is really pretty.
It is pretty.
I'm really lucky with book covers. So in some ways, this project is an extension of my work in the baby book insofar as it sort of grapples with the aftermath of infertility and new motherhood. And it's a lot about sleep deprivation. And so I'll read some poems from this chapbook, which came out with Dancing Girl Press about a year ago. And then I'll just read one brand new poem, like never heard by anybody ever. So, in the cubiculum nocturnum, they do not sleep. Every 2 hours, her breasts fill with milk. In the cubiculum nocturnum, she props him on her chest, lets him drink. In the cubiculum nocturnum, they do not sleep. A boy within a box, a basket in a bed in a room. The mother puts the baby in a Moses basket next to her in bed, swaddled tight. She has waited so long for this, the crib now across from her bed. She has waited so long, she doesn't dare put him in it. Some books say never sleep with a baby, you can roll over and suffocate them. Other books say you should always share a bed. Mother's breath reminds them to keep breathing in the dark. They syncopate, they regulate body temperature. He's so small, she can't imagine putting him in another room or even far against the back wall. She has done this before. She knows to strip heavy blankets from the bed. She knows to keep him warm, but not too warm. It's just a matter of making it through the night. They will do this with slight variations, 365 more times, maybe 500, maybe more. In the dark, she counts treatment cycles, injections, ultrasounds, miles back and forth to the clinic. 2 cells become morula, blastocyst, embryo, fetus, boy. Here in the dark, the mother thinks of all there is to do: make blueberry muffins, sweet potato pancakes, wash the diapers, run the bleach cycle, run the dishwasher, scrub the egg left in the pan, sew the buttons on sweaters, stop at the pharmacy for iron supplements, for calcium, for vitamin B, schedule well visits, call the specialist about ear tubes, call the repairman to fix the dryer, call the repairman to fix the leak in the bathroom. Water is seeping into the wall. Here in the dark, she thinks of verbs. The time management expert says that women sleep on average 8.5 hours per night, even if they claim they are sleep deprived. The time management expert has 4 kids, a husband, a night nanny. How the mother resents the time management expert with her slick pictures and her nanny, her baby, who sleeps through the night. All the books say she must be doing it wrong. The happiest baby book, the cry it out book, the sleep them with them beside you book, the book with the 5 S's she can never remember. Shush, swaddle, swing, sleep. O goddess of Lunesta, grant me forgiveness for the sins of the unspeakable dark. These are the baby hours. 4 a.m. in the rocking chair, suck, suck, swallow. Down the hall, the girl is sleeping. Downstairs, the cat is chasing a mouse. The mother rocks and holds the baby swaddled tight. He's mewing, he is sucking in his sleep or half sleep. She can't put him down or he'll wake. This is not the family photo she imagined those long months of insemination and egg retrieval. Her whole body hurts. The arm from the holding, the back, the belly muscles gutted. It's deep winter, far from sunrise, and she slips the baby beside her in the bed, closes her eyes and tries to dream. Needles. It's always needles and syringes. On the news, another natural disaster, tornadoes across Oklahoma, babies ripped from their beds. On the news, the children drowned, kidnapped, starved, the worst case of abuse the officer had ever seen. On the news, another live shooter at a school. This mother's children are warm in their beds. Their refrigerator is stocked. Their water is clear. The heat is set at 68 degrees. This is what she tells herself in the night sweats. In the cubiculum nocturnum, they do not sleep. Every 2 hours, her breasts fill with milk. In the cubiculum nocturnum, she props him on her chest, lets him drink. So I'm just going to read one last poem, and this is a new thing, and this goes to the question sort of about poetry as fiction in some ways. So I'm working on this weird book, and I know my mother is in the audience here, which is weird, and so it's kind of an imagined family history. It's not 100% factually accurate because there's a lot of missing pieces, right, and questions. And so one of my responses to that is I've started a series of poems of they're quite literal in terms of imaginings, and they don't pretend to be anything resembling the truth. So I have this short sequence called My Great-Grandmother as Emma Goldman, and it's really offered an occasion for me to start thinking about kind of what it means to be Russian Jewish with Trump in the White House. So this is the second in this series, My Grandmother as Emma Goldman 2. She tells me use a mason jar and a whisk, not a churn, but still the butter separates from the milk. Roll it into a ball, rinse it, put it in the fridge. That's the first lesson. The second, chickens in the yard, garden tomatoes, snap peas, peppers. Put the hard base of celery stalks in water, watch it grow again. She tells me if you are going to be an anarchist, you need to be self-sufficient. Once you have learned this, paint a sign, take a bus to the Capitol, keep your voice strong, lemon, not honey in the tea. Only butter on bread you bake yourself. Slice it thick. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Judith, you're on mute.
I'm going to read a couple poems from my newest book, and called I Call to You from Time. It was published last year. And this is the time of year when people are putting out laundry on clotheslines. And I love this time of year for that, and the colorfulness and the beauty of a well-organized clothesline. Also, I wrote this poem around the time that I had watched a documentary about Tibetan monks and their prayer flags. So this is called Prayer Flags. I see now why each line of wash in a backyard makes me want to drop down on my knees, that I am witnessing the prayer of t-shirts, blue jeans, sheets, and underwear, the prayer flapping below terracotta rooftops in Siena, repeated in the same tongue right here in Tioga County, Pennsylvania. Don't tell me those women don't know they are praying. Have you ever watched them? Have you ever watched even a busy woman hanging out the holy ghosts of her family? Seen her stand there afterwards, her empty basket resting like a child on her cocked hip as she adored the spirit of the wind, tossing them into the deep blue mind of heaven. Even a grieving woman feels her feet lift from the earth when the breeze kicks up the ankles of her drying khakis, feels her shoulders sprouting wings as her blouse takes flight. I don't know if she is grateful as she clips each garment to her line, or if each one bodies forth a precious worry. Maybe her clothesline is one long wail. But watch her hours later when she goes to bring her wash in, leaning into the warm scent of sun woven with birdsong, closing her eyes for just a second as she guesses, this must be how God smells, pulling each piece into an embrace of folding, settling it in her basket, and giving the whole stack a final pat. I think I'm going to just read that one poem from this book because I too would like to read a few new things. It gets me kind of excited to do something brand new. So I've been writing a series of pandemic poems. And this one is called Why She Became a Crow During COVID-19. So she could stop watching the news. So she could carry the story of all colors on her wings into the gloom of gray sky. So she could stop counting her dead and attend one by one to the deer, raccoons, and squirrels killed by our wheels. So she could meet with her kind over a meal. So soaring, she could claim a station high among the pines, surveying only beauty. So diving, she could retrieve dropped pieces of our lives, pearl button, rhinestone earring, gleaming penny, make her nest a gallery of dazzle. So resting on a brace of eggs, her mind would never drop again into worry, so she could remember how to fly. And this one is very, very new. It's called A Reckoning. Thank God my sons insist they didn't know we were poor in the days when there was one can of tomato soup and half a box of Fruit Loops in the cupboard 2 days before payday. But each morning I sent them off in their white skin to school where they didn't have to learn certain kinds of fear. Decades later, at the grocery store, I fill my cart with whatever I want, then cringe that the cashier's pulled her mask below her nose. I consider complaining, but I just want to escape to the parking lot to pull mine off and suck in a lungful of air. My God, how does she stand it for 8 hours, handling our bills and coins, the currency of COVID, so she can go home and feed her young? I say, thank God, no son of mine has ever called for his mama while choking under a cop's unholy kneeling. I say, thank God, but damn it, it's only luck that each son breathes and has enough to eat. Just luck that we are standing on this side of the counter. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you so much, ladies. Yeah, Judith, that last poem, I'm sure it really hits home for me and it hits home for a lot of us. Thank you. I want to move on to some of the questions that we had. So Marjorie says, in connection to those questions that we were talking about last time, oh wait, whoops, that's a mistake. Gotta go back just a little more. Oh, okay, Ars Poetica question. So talking to Robin about Ars Poetica, this was from Rachel Parker, another poet. What are some tips you have about constructing an Ars Poetica? Is there a right way to do an Ars Poetica?
Is there a right way?
That was kind of me at the end. Just because yours was so
No.
good, and it was also an interval abecedarian, which is really hard to do, I'm sure.
It was fun, actually. I don't know. I think for me, I mean, in that, so that book has a number of different forms in it. It's got a pantoum, and I think it has a villanelle. It's been a while. Sestina. It's got a bunch of haiku, the abecedarian. It's a lot of form to control something that was really very much out of my control. For me, the abecedarian, it's a form I like. I use it frequently because, I mean, the alphabet is such an organic structure, I think, for us as writers. And it doesn't require, right, like meter or rhyme or anything extraordinarily strict. I mean, I usually honestly just start by writing the alphabet right down the page. And then going from there. The line lengths in that poem vary quite widely, and I think that helped because they didn't have to meet a really strict syllable count or anything like that either. So
right.
Making it loose, I guess, would be my advice, and just playing. Another abecedarian I have is also a catalog. So I guess it kind of tight subject matters. With a set vocabulary.
Those are great tips. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Were you going to say something else? I apologize.
Yeah, just that. I mean, there's the letters that are really challenging, right? Like
X, Z, Q. Well, Q's
yeah,
not
they're not fun letters. So
not fun letters. All right, so I found the question I was looking for. Judith, how did Bruce respond to the poems of yours that he was able to read? For instance, the dancing poem. Then Robin, I have a follow-up for you.
Bruce was also a writer, a really fine poet and fiction writer. And we met in a poetry writing workshop many years ago. And so we always critiqued each other's poems. And so he frequently, had criticisms to make. Of course, they were usually right, even though they irritated the hell out of me. But see Kathy, one of our friends, laughing. But and Mary. But he was usually right. And so that's how he responded. He usually responded less emotionally. And more as a critic and a fellow poet. But I have to say that at one point in our lives, he said, "Where are my love poems? Where are the love poems you were going to write me?" And sadly, I wrote most of them after he died.
Yeah, that's oh man, that's beautiful. And not not the circumstance, but just it's so weird because as a writer, sometimes it takes something really heavy in order for you to be able to compose something like that.
That's right.
I had such a hard time, and because I'm a poet myself, aside from what I do at CavanKerry, and the best poems that I've ever written about anyone was after the fact that they were deceased. And I think it's what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, the idea of distance, right?
Of what? I'm sorry.
Of distance.
Distance.
Yeah, being able to objectively look after the fact of something traumatic happening or like a big event, and we're able to parse it together and create the fiction out of that truth, and able to kind of like sort that stuff out. And speaking of sorting, Robin, there was a question here. Has your daughter read any of the poems from the baby book, and is she writing?
I do not believe that my child has read any of these poems, but book is in the house, and who knows what happens when mom isn't around, so it's possible. No, my teenager is has done some writing in school, but is not a writer, but is a visual artist. So that's their way.
Great, an artist of a different medium. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so there's a question here from Gabriel. Going back to the topic of poetry as fiction, I'm wondering if one or both the authors can talk about the therapeutic nature of recrafting the narratives of our own lives through their writing. How can writing your history change the way it directly informs your present and future?
I guess for me, I think in all kinds of writing, but I think especially in poetry and nonfiction or memoir, we write to find out what we think and what we feel. And I think that for me, what helps shape the present moment and the future is, going into that place and allowing yourself to not know where the poem is going, not really even know what you think or feel or even are. That's how it informs it for me.
I like in a lot we write to find out what we think and feel. Maybe I'll borrow that from but I guess I don't feel like writing this particular book was therapeutic. Like, that's not a term I think that I would use. But it offered me a way to kind of make sense of an experience in some way. Maybe that is therapeutic, and maybe I just have a limited understanding of what that term is. But like, it was emotionally really draining to write and then revise again and edit again and so on. And it's the book that was published also has a very different shape than the book that I wrote, just because of the process, right, of back and forth with editors. And so in some ways, I don't know, maybe it gives it gives a certain kind of closure to the experience that isn't necessarily actually there, kind of in my lived experience, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So, I will say, I mean, that this doesn't speak to the work that I read tonight, but I have a book that's a memoir, about it overlaps in some ways with the baby book. And that's a book about experiences in my late 20s that was written in my mid 30s and then published in my late 30s. And so it's like identity becomes a moving target.
Whoa.
And if I had to write that book now, it would look so different, just because of the kind of temporal, right, distance. So.
And that's kind of the nature of even publishing, right? Just the amount of time it takes for something to publish. Like when we're putting our list of published books, we're like on a 2-year slated system. So by the time you're writing a book, and God knows how long it was taking you to actually write that, by the time it goes to press, and by the time it goes through the process, by the time it hits the shelves, there's been a lot of space in between there. And a question that someone else asked, and I like that we keep returning to these questions of time and space, especially that COVID and like now BLM it's been such a meditation for everyone. Really kind of sitting and identifying different parts of themselves that now we are being forced to have the time to look at. So I'd like to know what the difference was, or what your feelings or thoughts are about the writer you were several years ago, or we can even talk about like the beginning of your career when you started being a professional writer, to how you feel about your growth and where you are as the matured writer now.
I'll go, I guess. I mean, I even feel tonight just reading, between or across, right, the baby book and this more recent work. I mean, I don't feel like the same writer in most ways. I mean, there are some, I guess, some strategies that I've develop that I take with me. I'm always interested in persona poems. I'm always sort of a minimalist, and I think I've only gotten more so as I keep writing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not a writer growing up in the internet age, right? I think about my students who have their first published things in their, early 20s that go up on a website, and it's there, right? And will be there forever. I guess I like developing off off the public stage, if that makes sense. So that's my answer. I'm feeling old right now, though.
Well, my dear, wait till you're 68. I'm finding that in my dotage, I'm writing some. I'm feeling more free to experiment. I'm feeling more playful. When I was first writing, I wrote mostly very personal, I guess what has been kind of denigrated as confessional poetry. But I too have written a lot of persona poems. I love the persona poem. I tend to be a narrative poet, usually, but also I hope lyrical. But lately, more of my personal poems have wanted to be linked to, I guess, what I would call larger issues, if that makes any sense. And it's not, now I'm completely blanking on her name. Edna St. Vincent Millay was really, really put down because she did write a lot of very political poems. And, after she had been sort of the darling of the poetry world of her time. And then she started writing political poems, and everybody hated her because she'd sold out and it wasn't art for art's sake, and etc. But I do think it's possible to find ways that you personally witness or are involved in some deeply emotional way with what is going on in the larger world. Well, like your Emma Goldman poem during a time of Trump, and for me, I find myself kind of doing more of that now. When I'll just say that I met Gwendolyn Brooks many years ago and got to have dinner with her, and as we were walking to her reading, she said, now, I mean, we're talking about 25 years ago. And she said, now is the time for writing big poems. And I'm thinking, well, I'm beginning to think, when isn't the time? But I also think, the smaller domestic poems of people like Avon Boland, are equally important. I guess I'm going on. Anyway, that's enough.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand that each different kind of poem feeds to this larger macro poem, or like macro canon of what we are writing now, or what we are writing towards. So that totally makes sense. And it's so interesting how, because see, the thing is, and when I was in my undergrad, my minor was in anthropology, and for every paper you needed secondary sources. And because I was a creative writing minor as well, I would always use poetry as secondary sources. And you are literally, poets usually do the lip service, or they're the mouthpieces of the community, right? No matter what community, or no matter what you're researching. So for those of you out there in the audience, or who are going to watch this YouTube video later, if you're writing, write, continue to write, because all of it is very important to our overall ideas of history, and how we ingest history, and how we learn to understand ourselves. There's a lot that we work through in that writing process, and it was exemplified tonight with these two authors. Does anyone have final words? I feel like we're coming up on the end. We're running out of questions a bit. Judith, Robin, going once, going twice for the group chat. I'll give it maybe another 10 seconds if you're still on the QWERTY keyboard.
No, maybe somebody else would like a final word.
Maybe someone else from CavanKerry Press. I'll just put that out there if Gabe or Jonathan wants to come on.
Nope.
Okay, Gabriel's coming up.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you again for a great reading. I'm loving the opportunity that we've had for this series to really come together, and it's due largely in part to Dimitri's efforts. It's also due largely in part to each of the authors being willing to carve out some time to do this. It's a real privilege to be part of it. So thank you. And if you haven't gotten your copy of the baby book or Practicing the World, the link is in the chat a couple times. And World Book or World Baby, either one will work as a code to give you 25% off. Thank you so much to everyone who came.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And look at all you beautiful faces. I just put the whole grid on to see everyone here.
Thank
I
you,
see everyone
everybody.
clapping.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. And remember, as you keep going on, as Gabe said it in the chat box, poetry is a political statement. So please, whether you're a poet or not, try your hand at it. Use it for catharsis. Use it for your own kind of development. And just keep writing, everyone, and keep reading. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.